you very much. Thanks for having me. I just want to spend a little bit of time just telling you a bit about my entrepreneurial journey over the last few years and tell you a few stories around that. So I want to kind of start when I was a teenager, when I was about 13, 14. My form of a teenage rebellion was kind of lashing out a bit at my dad and my family's wealth. My dad's a successful entrepreneur in the restaurant business. He had a restaurant called Littlejohn's. So me and my little brother, we grew up in kind of relative privilege. And my kind of response to that when I was 13 or 14, I was kind of like, why is it fair that we should have a big house and a fancy car when there's people kind of starving in the world? And really sort of threw it back in my dad's face a bit, which in hindsight was a bit harsh, because I think the only reason he wanted to become a success was to provide for his family. But that was the response he got. So that kind of teenage angst translated itself into an idealism where I wanted to, I don't know what the cliched term is, but I wanted to change the world or make a difference in some way. So I went to university and studied politics and economics with a view to come out the other side and try and make a difference in some way. So when I left university, I decided that I wanted to go and work for the government. I wanted to be a development economist and go and advise developing countries on policies to create economic growth. So I went and applied for this job, and it was one of these great big long 6-month application graduate scheme processes where you had to go to London and do assessment centres and various different tests. And I got right through to the very last stage, which again was another assessment centre down in London, which was kind of a test of your sort of personality. It tested your teamwork and leadership skills and different things like that. And afterwards I just got a 1-sentence email saying, sorry, you've been unsuccessful in the application. So I was a bit kind of deflated, and I decided I didn't really want to jump through anyone else's hoops in these graduate scheme process things, and I decided I'm going to set up my own business. So I brainstormed a few different business ideas, and they all seemed to revolve around events. So I decided I'm going to set up an events company, which I called Capital Events in Edinburgh. So the first event that I ever created was a fashion show, which I put on during the Edinburgh Festival, which I called the Festival Fashion Show. Now, to put this into a bit of context, I was 21 at the time and I was single, and I thought this could be a great way to kind of meet and hang out with lots of attractive models. Could be a good chat line. So I rented a venue in Edinburgh and approached lots of different high street retailers to give us clothes for different rounds, and I'd be walking down the street, and if I saw a really attractive girl in the street, I'd sort of stop her and say, sorry to interrupt you, my name's Josh, I'm the organiser of the Festival Fashion Show, have you ever considered modelling? And that's kind of how I recruited most of my models. So we were about a week out from the event, and I was trying to drum up some business for ticket sales, and I'd managed to get a sponsor for the event, which was this car dealership in Edinburgh called Kenny Dunn's, who sold kind of flash cars. So I phoned Kenny and said, Kenny, I'm going to do a sort of press shoot and invite the newspapers down. So I asked him to bring down an Aston Martin car, and I asked all the models to come down. And I remember during this day there was a very kind of specific moment that I really realised that entrepreneurship was for me, and I could pretty much pinpoint it to this moment. So it's kind of a joke, but this was like the first time in my life, like the fashion show, it wasn't a real thing, it was just something that was in my head, and then it became real, and that was a real kind of buzz and a real thrill, and I think I've been a bit addicted to that buzz ever since. So after this I kind of started to take it a bit more seriously, and I thought, I rented a little office on George Street in Edinburgh, and we came up with different event ideas. So the first event was, after this, I decided I wanted to put on exhibitions. So I came up with an exhibition which we put up in the Royal Concert Halls in Glasgow called Scotland's Christmas Fair. We sold stands to people with gift companies and craft companies, and it worked really well. And I thought, this kind of works. If you put Scotland's before something, people seem to buy into that. So then I came up with another event and called it Scotland's Ski and Snowboard Show. And we put on a big exhibition at the SECC, lots of different companies from the ski industry. And then the next event I came up with, by this point I was really passionate about business and entrepreneurship, so I created an event, called it the Scottish Business Awards, for which we've had speakers like Bill Clinton, and we've got George Clooney coming this November. So a lot of people ask me now, Josh, how did you get involved in the Scottish Business Awards? So if I'm honest, I have to kind of say, well, I created an event and I called it the Scottish Business Awards. And I think because I called it the Scottish Business Awards, everyone kind of assumed it was really prestigious and it had been around for a long time. And I just didn't really correct that assumption. So I'll tell you the story of how we ended up getting Bill Clinton to come, because it's quite a good story. So the first year we had 800 top business people in the room, and we booked Bob Geldof to speak. And right at the end of the night we decided to put on a charity auction for a charity I was quite passionate about. So before the event I wrote off to lots of different people to try and get really good auction prizes, because I knew I was going to have a room full of wealthy individuals. So I think I probably wrote off to Andy Murray and asked for a tennis lesson, and I probably wrote off to the Formula 1 drivers and asked for a track day. And one person I thought I'll get in touch with to maybe ask for a meeting that we could auction off was Bill Clinton. So I thought, right, how will I go about this? So I googled Bill Clinton, and it came up with the Clinton Foundation, so I clicked into that and clicked into the contact page, and it was one of those pages where there's not even a phone number or an email address. It was just like a contact box. So I thought the chances of anyone even reading this are slim, but I kind of typed in, we're organising this event, 800 business leaders, what would be the chances of getting a meeting with Bill Clinton that we could auction off on the night? So to my surprise I got an email back, and this woman from the Clinton Foundation's office, she asked a few questions and asked about the demographics of the event, and then she said, look, what we could offer you isn't a meeting with Bill Clinton, but a spend the day with Bill Clinton in New York prize. So I was like, right, but the catch is that you have to raise a minimum of £60,000 and you have to split half of it with the Clinton Foundation. So I kind of thought, well, there's nothing to lose, we may as well take the prize and we'll auction it off and see what happens. So we took the prize. It was right towards the last thing of the night, and the auctioneer said, this is the star prize of the evening, spend the day with Bill Clinton in New York, but it's a £60,000 reserve. We have to hit £60,000 or the prize can't be sold. So he started the bidding at 5,000, and then it went to 10,000, and then 15, and it got up to £30,000. And I remember it still very vividly to this day. There was a guy right at the back of the room who was an oil tycoon in Aberdeen called Leo Coote, and he was at 30 grand. And the auctioneer was saying, who's going to give me 35? We have to get to 60 or this prize isn't going to happen. And at this point nobody else in the whole room was bidding, so I thought, it's not going to happen. And he said, somebody give me 35. And what I discovered later is that Leo Coote at the back of the room, he was pretty drunk. He'd had quite a bit of wine, and there was people kind of leaning over his table and sort of holding his hand up for him. And he basically bid up on himself, so he bid up 35, 40, 45, all the way up to 60, and sold the prize to him. So that meant I could go back to the Clinton Foundation and say, 60,000, there's your 30, thanks very much, see you later. And then a couple of months went by and we thought, let's organise the event again, and I thought, who can we get to be a speaker? And I thought, I'll get back in touch with that lady at the Clinton Foundation. So I phoned her up and said, look, what would it actually take to bring Bill Clinton to Scotland to speak at this event? And she said, well, basically it'd be a massive donation to the Clinton Foundation. I said, right, what are we talking? And bounced around a few numbers. And she basically said, if you could make a donation of £210,000 to the Clinton Foundation, then you'll come and speak at your event. So I kind of thought, I didn't really have any money in the bank at all at that time. But I kind of thought, right, we can sell so many tables for such a price at the dinner. And I thought, I think we could just about cover that if we sold enough tables. So I kind of went back full of confidence, £210,000, let's go for it. And she said, well, it's not quite that simple. We can't just give you Bill Clinton's name just to advertise on the vague hope that you'll pay us this money. We don't really know who you are. So if you want to do it, you have to pay in instalments. So if you want to do it, we need £50,000 in 2 weeks. We need another £50,000 in a month. And we need the remainder prior to the event. So I sat in the office, I had the contract in front of me, and I just thought, oh, fuck it, signed the contract, posted it back to New York, and I had 2 weeks to raise 50 grand. So I started picking up the phone to anyone I kind of knew with money. So the first call was to my dad. and sort of had to apologise for giving him such a hard time when I was younger. I'd asked him to buy a table at the awards and pay me for it straight away. And the great thing about the Scottish business community is it's quite a small place, so I phoned up anyone that sent me a nice email after the first year and said, this is the deal, we've booked Bill Clinton, but we've got this money to raise, will you buy a table and pay me for it straight away? And enough people said yes, we cleared the deposits and it all happened. So then we thought, how do we follow that? And I thought maybe we could get Richard Branson. He lives on Necker Island, it might be tough, but last May it happened. And like I say, we've got George Clooney coming this November. So when these kind of things started to sort of happen and come off, a really strange realization kind of dawned on me that, like, when you grow up, you kind of get told that the world is the way that it is, and you know, you go to school and then you can either maybe go to uni or college, and there's these various career options. But when this kind of stuff started to happen, I really realized that that's not really true. The world's actually really malleable, and if you want to change it or influence it, you can, and people will buy into that. So about 4 years ago, when we were first getting involved in this and first set up this Business Awards event, I was reading a book by a guy called Professor Muhammad Yunus. It's this man here. So he's an amazing, globally recognized figure. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. And I was reading this book where he described an idea that he called a social business. So he basically described in the book how in Bangladesh, where he's from, he's created over 50 different companies, and some of them have gone on to become really large billion-dollar businesses, but he's never owned a single share in one of them. So every single business that he ever created was because he saw a particular social problem in Bangladesh, whether that was financial exclusion for women, or malnutrition in children, or no electricity in the villages. And his solution every time was not to create a charity, not to ask anyone for donations, but to create a business to tackle that problem. So I thought, wow, what a really inspiring idea. And at this time I was organising this Business Awards event for the first year, and I knew I was going to have all these influential business people, and I thought it would be great to get this guy Muhammad Yunus to come to Scotland to address these influential business people, and if he can inspire a few of them as to the possibilities to use a business to tackle a social problem, then who knows what good might come of that. So I basically wrote off to him, didn't hear much back, sort of pestered, and the event was kind of drawing closer, and I didn't really have much meaningful communication with his office. So I said to the guy that I was speaking to, look, if I can have a meeting with Professor Yunus, I'll come to Bangladesh and I'll meet with him, and I'll tell him about the event personally, and hopefully he'll agree to come. So this was back in 2011, and they said, okay, if you want to come, he's in Bangladesh in October, you can come and meet him then. So me and my girlfriend at the time, Alice, went out to Bangladesh, and we spent a week there, and we toured around his different social businesses, and we met him. And that experience of being in Bangladesh and seeing the sort of pages of his book come to life, and seeing literally the millions of lives transformed by this idea of a social business, it inspired us so much that it completely changed the track of our lives, really, and we decided to try and come back to Scotland and set up our own social business. So we came back, and we had a little office on George Street in Edinburgh, and I used to go out and eat my lunch at Pret and Subway and get a coffee in Starbucks. And I thought, if we could create a sort of sandwich coffee shop that sold really nice food, really good service, everything else, but it had an underlying social mission, and hopefully people would come and choose us. So the basic idea of Social Bite is that we've got 4 shops, 2 in Edinburgh, 2 in Glasgow. We're just about to open in Aberdeen and Dundee. Really good food, good service, nice environment, but the social mission is that 100% of the profits that are made are distributed out to 4 different charities. A quarter of our workforce are people that have struggled with backgrounds of homelessness, and we operate a service called Suspended Food and Coffee, which means that you as customers can come in and get your own lunch, but you can also prepay for anything on the menu for a homeless person to come in and eat later. So I've got a little video about Social Bite that just explains the concept, which I'll play now. Yeah, I realise that there's a certain demographic in society, right at the bottom, where social mobility just doesn't really exist. The first person we took on from a homeless background was a young guy called Pete. So we met him, he sold the big issue outside our shop, he was 21, and he plucked up the courage himself and he asked if we had any jobs going. So we kind of thought, well, the whole point's to create a social benefit, so we thought, why not? So we took him on part-time, washing the dishes, and then he got promoted to full-time. And when he got promoted to full-time, the local Edinburgh newspaper ran a little story on it, saying this guy sold the big issue, now he's got a job. So we, as a new business, were quite excited. We thought this is cool, good publicity. And then the next day after that, all of the national newspapers obviously saw the story, and almost every national newspaper in Scotland also ran a story on it. So we were in the Sun, the Daily Record, the Scotsman, the Herald, saying this story, Pete sold the big issue, now he's got a job. So again, as a new business, we thought this is brilliant, great publicity. But looking back now, I kind of think it was a bit strange. All that really happened was a young, able person went from selling a magazine to washing dishes. Like, who cares? But it really highlights to me that kind of thing, it just doesn't happen. When you're in that segment of society, the big issue is kind of a ceiling. We've got another guy that works for us in our shop on Rose Street, Ian, who sold the big issue on Rose Street for 14 years. And I just think that's incredible that for 14 years he was there selling the big issue. In the general election campaign that's just happened, all the talk was about the economy and trying to stimulate employment. But over the last 14 years we've had economic booms and busts and booms, and we've had record employment, we've had record unemployment, and throughout the entire time Ian was there selling the big issue. So I think that social enterprise has a really crucial role to play in bringing people that are currently excluded from the system and kind of hauling them into it. I want to kind of finish by telling you a story. I don't want to make it seem like too much of a fairy tale, so I want to tell you a story about when it's not quite gone to how we would have scripted it. And basically about a year and a half ago we had a bit of a problem in the business with theft. So little things were sort of going missing. So 2 Christmases ago we closed the shop for Christmas and we stripped the tills, but we just left some of the small change in there, the 10p's and the 5p's and the copper coins. And we had a few of the guys in doing a deep clean whilst we were away. And when we got back, all that small change had gone. We thought, who the hell's nicked that small change? And then other little things started going missing. So another £10 from someone's wallet, or a member of staff's iPod went missing, or £10 from the till. And we thought, and we suspected a few people, but there was this one guy that worked for us, John, who he didn't even come into the equation of our thinking because he was such a nice guy. But then more and more coincidences started happening, in whichever shop John was in, that was where things were going missing. So we kind of thought, it has to be John. So I decided one day to go in and kind of bluff him a bit. So I went into our Shanwick Place shop where he was working and said, John, can I have a word please? And we went and sat down in one of the booths. And I said to him, look John, something I've not told you, I've not told anyone, is that we've had covert cameras put in the back of the shop and we've caught you stealing from us, stealing from your colleagues. I said, if you admit to it now, then there'll be no consequences and we can help you with whatever it is you're going through. But if you deny it now, then there'll be some really, really serious consequences. And he was sat right opposite me and he looked me straight down the eyes and he said, show me the footage. If you've got the footage, show me the footage, because I have not stolen from you. He said, I swear on my life, you've given me this chance, I would never steal from you. And I looked at him right in the eyes, and I remember that day I went back to the office and said, it's definitely not John, 100%. He called my bluff, didn't even flinch. So anyway, a couple of weeks went by, and an important aspect of the business is we do corporate catering. We've got lots of top corporate clients, and we had this delivery to a law firm to do that day, and the shop manager said to John, can you take this platter of sandwiches round to this law firm, Lindsay's? So he took it round, that was fine. The next day Alice phoned up and said, hi, I just wanted to check how the food was, and the reception said, yeah, the food was good. Just one problem, whoever delivered it round, the other receptionist's mobile phone went missing. So I thought, oh Christ, it was John. So I kind of went into the shop, said, John, let's go. So we went and sat down on Princes Street Gardens on a bench, and I said, you took that woman's phone. And he sort of denied it initially, and eventually kind of broke down and said he was embarrassed, and sort of started crying. And what it kind of came out then, which we didn't realise, is that he'd had a really terrible gambling addiction since he's in his 30s now. He'd had since he was 16. And the phone had already been pawned, the money already gambled, and everything that he took was straight into Ladbrokes. So I kind of, at that point, you're faced with a really difficult management decision. Your instincts would say sack him. Most common logic would say to sack him. But during that time when I was speaking to him, and I knew a bit before anyway, I found out more about his story. And it's quite typical of the stories from people of these kind of backgrounds. So John, like almost everyone from that background that works for us, grew up in care. His parents were drug addicts and alcoholics, and he lived with sort of friends of his parents from the age of 0 till 7. And basically him and his two siblings were locked in a dark room effectively. They had a bucket in the middle to do the toilet in, and they were fed porridge oats. And that was his life from 0 till 7. And then I kind of thought, if that's your life and you get to 16 and you get taken into the bookies and you kind of win some money, and it's that first real buzz of adrenaline and joy, then what a ridiculously addictive thing that could be. So I heard a quote from a guy called Father Gregory Boyle, who runs a similar thing in America, which I try and let inform me in decisions such as this. And he said, what we need in society is a compassion that stands in awe of the burdens that the poor have to carry, rather than in judgment at the way that they carry them. And I really thought that was quite profound. So what we did with John is we suspended him for 3 months, during which time we found a local Gamblers Anonymous group and some counselling. And now for the last year he's been back working in our central kitchen, and he's doing very well. So that's us. Come and visit us for a sandwich. Thanks for having me, and have a good day.